Hello everybody, my name is Brianna Fees and today we'll be talking about the Bhopal gas disaster. Now, you may be asking yourself, what happened to cause such a disaster in Bhopal? In 1984, there was a massive gas leak in Bhopal, India, caused by a chemical plant producing the insecticide 7. This gas leak quickly spread to neighboring communities, killing thousands immediately and injuring even more. The consequences of this accident still plague the area today, as unknown chemical residues still reside on the site. Now, we have to ask ourselves, what kind of mistakes led to such a disaster happening? The plant was built in an area meant for light industrial use. Hazardous materials were never meant for this area due to its swampy-like nature, to a degree. Not like a large swamp, but like just a little marshy. And the fact that there were many neighboring communities very close by. So hazardous materials on site could run down and affect these communities. An exception was made here on the pretense that certain hazardous materials, such as mic gas, which we will get into later, would be shipped in small quantities. However, over time, this was abused and ignored due to the competition in the industry and in an effort to increase profit as much as possible. From now on, raw, extremely hazardous materials were not only produced on-site, but also held in large quantities to increase efficiency. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is this mic gas you are talking about and how dangerous is it? Mic gas is formally known as methyl isocyanate, and it is commonly used in the creation of pesticides. According to the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, in a book published by them, mic gas is described as a volatile, colorless liquid that is extremely flammable and potentially explosive when mixed with air. Down on the bottom, you're able to see the chemical formula for it, just in case you're interested in it. How was this gas, which was so dangerous, able to reach the public to such a high degree in the first place? Due to famine and crop failures in the early 1980s, the plant had to cut its cost, so much so that in 1984, the facility was producing about 1/4 of its production capacity. Attempts to sell the facility were being made, while in the meantime numerous amounts of safety equipment and procedures were being shut down to reduce costs. This is a big warning sign to this company and the companies associated with this facility, how their priorities were a little out of order, but we will get more into that later. By shutting off numerous pieces of safety equipment to maintain a small amount of production while also buying themselves time to move somewhere else, because they were trying to sell the facility, they almost began a domino effect of sorts. Now, on December 2nd, 1984, there was a small leak that started it all. The pressure reading on one of the tanks had increased, but the workers on shift were not worried about it. One worker even said, quote, "The instruments were often not working, they were corroded," end quote. This is a good example of how when you're working with hazardous materials, you need to have equipment that you can trust. If something as simple as a pressure reader, which I believe is a barometer, is not working, then that is an issue. A safety device that was used to nullify toxic discharge had also been turned off weeks prior. And to make matters worse, a faulty valve allowed 1 ton of water to mix with 40 tons of the mic gas. Additionally, refrigerant that was used to ensure that the mic gas remained at a safe temperature had been migrated to another part of the plant, around, excuse me, allowing room for pressure and heat to accumulate from the chemical reactions of the water and the mic gas mixing. This combination of water, heat, pressure, and as well as corroded iron tanks all catalyzed this reaction that took place. In just 2 hours, the pressure became so great that another safety valve failed, resulting in the gas to leak into the community that was very close by. Now, history's importance is the lessons that it can provide to future generations. So we have to ask ourselves, how can we prevent this happening again in the future? For starters, when engineers of all sorts are behind a project, the area you are working with should be taken into consideration. Allow me to clarify, heavy consideration. The building site was never meant to inhabit hazardous materials given the land's geography as well as the nearby communities. While it was only a small exception they made at first, agreeing to only ship small amounts of hazardous materials, the company soon deciding to handle large amounts of mic gas and other hazardous materials on the site was grossly irresponsible. Additionally, the engineers behind the layout of the facility failed to consider what would happen if the water were to mix with the mic gas. Having these two products in close proximity to each other without assessing the risks with another instance of irresponsibility on the company's behalf. They had these tanks outdoors in the wide open, and there's rain, so while I'm sure when they put the tanks together, they thought it would work forever, that was just not the case because the iron corroded and the safety valves were all seemingly going bad. And that brings me to my next point, sacrificing vital safety features that are there for obvious reasons to save money was an insanely poor ethical decision. Instead of ceasing production and saving money to keep the facility and surrounding communities safe, as the plant prepared to transport materials, they chose to maintain some production while sacrificing the very thing that was there to protect them. It is unclear who exactly made these calls to cease certain safety operations, but if any chemical engineers were involved, they should have known the risks of allowing mic gas to exist in certain conditions. Additionally, I feel it would be a great habit for companies to consistently question the ethics behind the decisions they're making, as well as cooperating with specialists and obtaining their opinions. And finally, we have to ask, how did this impact the field of engineering, to which we know today? This event directly inspired the Environment Protection Act, which was passed in 1986 in India. This consequentially created the Ministry of Environment and Forests. This mistake sent a message to the engineering world about how important safety measures and proper risk assessment is in all areas of engineering. Some examples of companies who learned from this are listed below. ICI, a British chemical company with a facility in India, shifted their priorities in favor of the safety of the people and the environment. Ever since 1984, 30 to 40% of their capital expenses go towards environmental projects. Another example, kind of on the other side of the coin, DuPont, a U.S. chemical company, came to an agreement with the Indian government that absolved it of all liabilities in the case of an accident. They planned to move to Goa, India. However, for nearly a decade, the community riled up and protested the building of such an establishment, eventually leading to DuPont to give up. Fortunately, the Indian government wasn't so easy on them the second time around. When DuPont attempted to move to Chennai, I may have pronounced that wrong, they were demanded to take higher consideration into the safety of the public and the environment. And that'll be all of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.